As mentioned, we're going to be having two different panels this morning. This first panel will be going back and forth with questions. If you have questions in the audience, we'll have time towards the end, so let us know if you have questions. And our first panel is going to be looking at the topic of managing employee misconduct, misdeeds, and deception. You forgot your shoe up here, Dr. Red Shoe, by the way. How to protect your company's image, reputation, and your revenues. So I'd like to bring up our panelists here. We have Maria Dwyer, who's the member in charge of Clark Hill. We have Matt Friedman, co-founder of Tanner Friedman and Strategic Communications. Chuck Scrafano, business development of Oswald Companies. And Ken Sharkey, president and CEO of Ulliance founder. Come on up, folks. So this is intended to be more of a conversation as opposed to directing. It's not going to be a grand inquisition. You're all here because you're experts in your respective fields. And I think so that people here in the audience and maybe watching online here, I don't know if it's web streamed or taped or whatever, but others will be watching this. If you can maybe just give us a quick thumbnail about yourself and what it is your company does in terms of this crisis mode. And Maria, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Carol. So, as Carol mentioned, I am the member in charge of Clark Hill in our Detroit office. We are a full-service law firm. We have 25 offices from coast to coast. And a lot of the things Margarita talked about, I'm proud to say that we're doing that in our own office. But I am a labor and employment attorney, and so oftentimes I come into your businesses and I train employees to prepare them for emergencies, for disaster, for issues that come up between employees in the workplace. So things like EEO training, we do active shooter training, all types of training, and to Margarita's point, we recommend training annually, and oftentimes we'll do series of training, so each quarter we will implement a different type of training, and I think employees enjoy when someone comes in and they're able to see that their employer is investing in them as employees. So I think workplace training is critical.
And Matt?
Tanner Friedman, we're a public relations and communications firm headquartered here in the Detroit area, and we get involved in what I would call adversity situations with our clients. When we hear crisis, it's not necessarily a fire or a flood or a hurricane or something like that. It's really any time that there could be negativity, there could be bad news, internally or externally. And as I've thought about this panel today, looking back, I've been doing this now more than 20 years, I'd say the majority of adverse or crisis situations I've worked with have involved the workforce somehow, or a member of a workforce somehow. Oftentimes good companies find themselves in bad situations because of a bad hire or something that happens in the workplace or to the workforce. So I look forward to talking about that here today. I often work with attorneys and am recommended to their clients to help through situations because you have to look at these situations from a legal perspective and from a communications perspective and make them both work. And when we talk about communications, we're talking about inside an organization and outside an organization, often with the media, but many times in situations that don't warrant news coverage, but can still affect a company's reputation.
Chuck Scrafano from Oswald. You guys may know Oswald from the two-time winner of the Cain Schools Place to Work Award. So not too many people are aware of Oswald. We're a Cleveland-based company, 125 years old. We're 100% employee-owned. And our job in this equation is basically to help educate the customer on what they, if there's a trigger, how to go about notifying us to notify the insurance company, because the insurance company has many layers of protection in these things inherent in your policies that deal with crisis management as far as, PR and cyber, all these different things. It's part of your plan, and it's paid for. You pay for that as part of your policy. To, when there's a trigger, to have us inform us when we get people involved, whatever the situation may be.
Ken?
Hi, Ken Sharkey from Ulliance. I'm the president and CEO. And I founded the company 30 years ago when I was 26. following the first crisis in my life when my father died on my 10th birthday. And so I quickly learned how bad things happen to good people, became a licensed psychotherapist, and today Ulliance provides employee assistance programs, training, crisis management for about 1 million people throughout the world. And what I've learned is that crisis and traumatic events are equal opportunity. It doesn't matter what type of company we're in. Large healthcare organizations such as Beaumont, municipalities, IT companies. When you have people, you have crisis. Thank you.
Keeps everybody in business, right?
Yes.
So I'm just curious, since you're all dealing with different companies, different organizations, and what you do, how much of what you do is troubleshooting after the fact versus being brought in to help pre-plan something? And maybe you can talk a little bit about it, starting with you, Maria.
I think it's a little bit of both. I always like to come in and work with folks before a crisis hits. That's the optimal choice, obviously. And so how do we do that? We do that with training, helping employers identify both their internal team and their external team. And what do I mean by that? Internally, preparing with your marketing director, if you've got a marketing director in-house. Maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the HR person. And then the internal team would help you to identify who should be part of your external team. And that would include insurance, PR, your attorney. So identifying those two key components before a crisis hits, I think, is critical to success during any crisis. But if brought in after an incident occurs, then I would work quickly to then identify those teams and determine what next steps and immediate steps need to be taken.
Ken, let me go next to you. Let's just break it up here so that we're not going straight in line here. Talk about something that's done as a preliminary planning in advance versus something's happened, there's a crisis, and you're brought in to help troubleshoot.
Right, our focus is really on being proactive and then reactive when proactive doesn't work. So we do supervisory training. The biggest challenge we have, no matter what type of industry we're in, is the psychological factor of denial. This will never happen to me, things of that nature. So we've had situations where we do a lot of management consultation to the human resource staff, which are the company's psychologists. However, they don't have malpractice insurance, so I'm sure the attorney would not advise them to be in their role. But a lot of times we have to sort of debate with them a little bit about this is a pretty serious situation. And again, when people don't know what to do, they oftentimes won't do anything. And so we'll do training. We'll be part of a crisis response team. When an event does occur, whether it's a suicide, whether it's a more natural type of situation where somebody dies of cancer or a heart attack, or somebody brings in an assault rifle into the workplace. We unfortunately deal with that every week. So most of the stuff you don't actually hear on TV, and we don't seem to see different geographical areas have more or less workplace violence or traumatic events. So we'll go in and do a debriefing, and whether that's a bank that's had a bank robbery, where shots were fired, things of that nature, help stabilize and get that group back to a new normal.
Chuck?
So when we offer customers policies, we always educate them up front on resources available from the insurance company standpoint. And this actually came up yesterday where insurance companies are more than happy to come out and very similar to what you're talking about earlier is help educate them on what happens if a trigger takes place. And more than happy to come in and do workshops, and come in and do lunch and learns. So we always educate our customers on the fact that they need to take advantage of what the insurance companies can offer from a training standpoint. And again, try to be proactive, do that up front. So if a trigger does happen, then they know what to do, they know who to contact, etc.
Yeah.
I'd say there are 3 scenarios that are the most common. Number one is we're working with an existing client, we're handling their publicity or their events or some other kind of service, and an adverse event happens or there's a reputational risk situation, and they asked us to expand our scope of work and help with that. The second one, which is really common, is I meet somebody on the worst day of their career, and they need help. And I have to get them to trust me while making small talk and introduction, because we have to get to work right away in communicating whatever the situation is. Then there's a third scenario, which has become more common in the last year or two. I wouldn't have even mentioned this on a panel like this 2 years ago, and that is a trusted advisor of some sort, a board chair, a board member, an attorney, or an advisor of some sort says, you need to meet these people and develop a relationship with them just in case. And so we are under contract now with a couple of clients that know that adverse situations are inevitable, and they want to be able to work with us, and so the purchase order is in place already, or we have some sort of arrangement where they can bring us in when they need to, but there's a relationship established at the beginning. That's really healthy, and maybe a sign of the times that with social media, bad news can travel really fast, and faster than ever, and organizations are starting to realize they need to be prepared for that.
So let's build upon that a little bit, because I think a lot of times when a crisis takes place, it's not just one element. It affects everything from the employee base, reputation, revenues, operations, and possibly the future of a company or entity if something should happen here. Talk a little bit about working together, getting the legal team, the HR team, marketing, PR, and sometimes in certain organizations there are silos around these various departments, bringing people together to try to accomplish this. And any thoughts on that?
It's imperative. The legal strategy takes one mindset. The PR strategy takes another mindset. It's great that insurance is involved here, because insurance will pay the bills sometimes, which eases some of the burden off of senior management about, we didn't anticipate this, how are we going to pay for it? And I'm glad that you're talking about some of the employee assistance things, because one of the things that good companies want to do is communicate in times of adversity that they're trying to do the right things. And so having resources available and being public and communicating that resources are available are one way of doing that. A lot of times when we get involved in a crisis situation, we'll talk about trying to approach it from the inside out. And what I mean by that is you focus on the internal audience first. You focus on the workforce first, because oftentimes they're the people first affected or most affected by whatever's going wrong. And by putting a multidisciplinary team together from the beginning, you have a chance at having that perspective and looking at it from different angles simultaneously, rather than saying, oh, we need to talk to our attorneys, we'll get back to you. When the attorney has a seat at the table, when PR has a seat at the table, and other professionals that are required to be successful all have a seat at that table, decisions can be made quickly and in the best interest of the audience.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that a little bit about how the insurance companies actually pay for things. So, scenario in January where it was a storm, and it caused ice on the roof of an apartment building, carbon monoxide buildup, 2 people passed away, and what the insurance company did is they paid for both those funerals, they paid for grief counseling, other counseling, and they also spent another $48,000 to put them up in hotels, all the other people that survived that in the whole apartment building. As long as you notify the insurance company and you have to understand how each policy works within a 24-hour period of time, they will pay these things for an event.
I think about the various organizations we work with, and almost never is there a team approach. They sort of are the hub of the wheel, and so they might talk to the employee assistants, they might talk to they always call the attorney first, for liability issues, and that's their trusted advisor. But very seldom do we see that actually everybody gets on a conference call and talks. So that's unfortunate. I think sometimes the individual players, they want to be responsive to their client, and they kind of want to be that person that the client goes to. So sometimes, and I'm just being rigorously honest in terms of our experience, there's sometimes a little competitive feel that occurs. And so you have the poor HR director who's trying to be the quarterback and not always effective.
Anything on the silos within an organization and trying to get them to work together for a common cause of the crisis?
Yeah, that's too bad. You know, a part of what I do is, as I mentioned, EEO training, so diversity training, and I think in times of a crisis, you also need diversity in thought and diversity in perspective. And so, honestly, looking at this entire panel, including you, Carol, I think this is an example of a crisis management team. A member of media, your legal advisor, PR, you need your insurance. You also need to think about your employees' mental health. That's critical. And you want to ensure, I think, as I think you mentioned, that the first things first, and that may be, and every crisis is different, and certainly we can't prepare for every type of situation, but I think having that team in place will allow you to quickly gather and then determine what has to be the immediate first step. And that may be ensuring that your employees are well cared for. It may be contacting Carol or some trusted person in the media. So having that prepared is really the key to success.
Curious, people in the audience, how many people work for a company with more than 25 employees? More than 100 employees? Okay, so we're talking a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. If you're a big corporation, you have a big HR department or IT department, and there's lots of people there, and you have more time and resources to devote. But when you're a smaller entity and you don't have, as everybody's doing, they're working 24/7 on whatever their job is and focusing on that, how do you work in conversations, and it kind of talks about what Dr. Richard was talking about anticipating some of these things here. What advice do you have for particularly smaller and medium businesses who are already working 24/7 to try to add in consideration of this topic of thinking about crisis in advance, having plans in place for this scenario or that scenario, whatever? Let's talk a little bit about some of the tips.
So I would say having policies in place, even for a small employer, to have your policies in place is critical, again, to success. And one of those policies should be a media relations policy. And what does that mean? It means that when your receptionist takes a call from the Detroit Free Press, she's not offering up a statement on your behalf. She knows who to contact. So I often say, make sure that your employees are advised on how to respond from the front of the house to the back of the house. The first person your guests and your customers will see as they walk in the door is your receptionist. And that's a critical person on your team. As an employment attorney, I make sure that my clients are advised that we need to have the receptionist in our training in case the Department of Labor shows up or wage an hour. And we want to make sure that your receptionist knows to offer that person a nice cup of coffee and sit them in a room and then call me, right? Or call one of these other fine folks on the panel here. So making sure that you communicate, even if that's, and make sure you have your policies in place, and then just weekly email communications or weekly team meetings, making sure that your employees are in the fold on what's to be expected that week. Maybe you have an important customer coming in on a particular day, making sure everyone's advised of that. So keeping your team informed, I think, is critical.
And Matt, you mentioned that some of your clients you have as PR, strategy kinds of things, and then you're added and brought in when the crisis comes up. How do you, with someone maybe who is just starting into this consideration of crisis mode, how do you get them to make that leap to start planning versus just, reacting to?
Well, I think crisis planning, communications planning is important. We do it for clients, and everybody here today is going to recommend it. But I do think that it can be a little overrated. Here's what I mean by that. Just because you have a really good plan doesn't necessarily mean you have the relationships in place to be able to execute it to its fullest. So I recommend planning and thinking these things through and making sure you have policies and have processes. That's good business, but relationships are good business too. And I think that's what often gets overlooked. And I've seen companies get caught flat-footed because they have the plan in place and they felt a false sense of security because they didn't have the connections to the right people to be able to execute when the time came. Or, more importantly, try to get in front of something that they could see coming miles away, but they didn't have the people ready to go to be able to do that. You can't rely on your in-house team to do everything. People who are really good at doing their jobs every day and being really focused on the work don't always have the outside perspective that it takes to get you through an adverse situation. You need to think about that ahead of time.
I'd like to add to that. So the employee assistance field is not regulated at all. So you have a number of different models and types of programs out there. Every disability carrier or life insurance carrier provides a free EAP, okay? And so there are no relationships developed with that. There's no communication. It's a check-the-box EAP. And I'm a prudent consumer, so I like the word free, but what do you get for it? So what we do is we have an account management team that has a clinical and business background who develops a relationship with our clients. So you're not thinking, who the heck do I call? We don't really tend to think very clear in crisis. We tend to be reactive and we don't respond. And so without those relationships, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and it's not utilized.
Chuck, anything you want to add?
Well, you mentioned, you were asking earlier about the size of different companies. Unfortunately or fortunately, it depends, again, by the carrier here. But a lot of business owner policies are called BOPs. They're for smaller companies. A lot of times, when it relates to crisis management, they have a cap on those. Like, some have a cap for $250,000 that they're going to pay out. So again, for small business owners, it's even more important to kind of understand what the insurance companies are going to do, because the larger companies actually usually have more depth to those policies, more services out of those financing policies.
So Matt, you and I have talked often through the years. Matt does PR for a lot of clients, and when there's issues, I will call you saying what's up, what have you, and we'll be talking here. So maybe you can share just an example, a real life example here in the region, it can be in the state, of somebody who had a great plan that where it worked and anticipated and worked out well, maybe another where it didn't work out so well. Just give examples from what you've seen here. We're talking generically, but is there something more specific you can point to?
Sure. Well, I'll talk as briefly as I can about one that went really well, and I gave a whole half-hour presentation on this at another event earlier in the year. I'll summarize it as best as I can. But I was brought into a situation through an attorney whose client was an industrial company, and a worker died on the job. Worst case scenario for this company. And you've never heard this story, none of you in the room, because it never made the news. And the reason why it never made the news is the owner of the company only wanted to do the right things, whatever those were. And he listened to his legal counsel, and he listened to his employees, and he listened to me, who he'd never met before he had to listen. And everything was handled well, the way that the workforce was taken care of, the way that the family was taken care of, the way that investigators from regulatory agencies were given access to information of what happened. Everything worked out well for that company. And they had more of a values plan than a structured plan. Their plan was to do the right thing, whatever that meant, and to listen to counsel. And that worked. But I can tell you not as much about companies that didn't follow their plan, but companies that had completely unexpected situations. I worked with a company last year that fired their CEO and COO. How do you plan for that? Who would have thought that that would ever have happened? The COO had some misbehavior, the CEO looked the other way, and the board decided to fire both of them. And so the board and the remaining executives had to put the pieces together and ensure that the company survived that sort of turmoil. And good legal counsel helped with that. I'd like to think some good PR counsel helped with that too. But also some executives who were really stepping up and looking out in the company's best interest and had to create a plan of reorganization around a very unanticipated scenario. So that goes back to having the relationships in place. A law firm that had done some litigation work for them was brought in and said, what do we do? And they said, we need to do the following things, including bringing in PR counsel, including appointing an interim CEO, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple examples to show you how you can prepare, but when it comes down to it, instincts of people often take over.
Maria, I know you deal with a lot of different clients being on the legal side of this and bringing in other elements. Any examples you can mention of something similar where they were able to avoid a much worse situation because they had either game plan or reacted quickly in a proactive way?
So I spoke a little bit about having policies in place, and I think, as we all know, policies are only as good as the paper they're on, right? We need to implement those policies. So where I see and have seen a good outcome is where an employee voices a complaint, and our employees want to be heard. They want to know that the employer cares about them. And so if you have the policies, and I'm sure all of you do, an EEO policy, a complaint protocol in place, I often see things turn sideways when the complaint process is not followed through. So once you receive a complaint from your employee, take that complaint seriously and vet that through a full investigation. And then circle back to the employee. And we know as HR, you don't want to tell the employee the exact disciplinary action that was taken or exactly how you handled that person that was being complained of. But you want to circle back and close that loop and tell the employee, thank you for coming forward. Thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. We did do an investigation. We promptly addressed your concerns. And if you have any concerns in the future, please be sure to bring them back. And I think making sure that you circle back to that employee oftentimes will turn it away from a situation where there could have been litigation.
Chuck, any example you want to mention?
Back to Marie's point, often you only have 24 hours to report incidents, so you can't sit on it as a management team. Not maybe a good case that happened here is there's a call center that got, and again, I don't want to take too much of the cyber's thunder here, but the call center got ransomware on that, and their call center, their job was to protect their customers from the same thing. So the person, that was supposed to protect their customers basically got hacked, and all their customers got hacked. So there's an incredible PR issue here, and it's they're trying to get ahead of it. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but there's still a lot of damage done because of the conception of being, we're here to protect you from a cyber incident, and they basically lost a lot of business that way. The only thing they can do about it, they do what they're supposed to do, but it doesn't always.
Kat, any examples?
Once the genie's out of the bottle, you don't control it anymore. So we had a situation where the Vice President of Human Resources gets a complaint about an employee who's terminated and talks to the HR director about calling the EAP because they were concerned about aggressive behavior in response. And so the HR director called kind of just perfunctory. So we started asking questions about the individual, history of violence, things of that nature. And while we were talking to her, and she really minimized the whole situation, the employee showed up to work with no shirt on and with hedge clippers. And he was going to trim the hedges. Granted, he was let go the day before. And she said, well, Charlie, he's a little strange, but he's harmless. And the call escalated. I eventually got on the call, and she really minimized the whole thing. So she was, rolling the dice. And the next day he came back. It was summer. It was a plant situation. The doors are usually open because there's no air conditioning in a plant. And he comes in and he kills 3 people with hedge trimmers. And so her career is destroyed. I mean, you don't get over something like that emotionally. She was just so, her feedback was, you don't understand, I have a good relationship with Charlie. And it had nothing to do with it. Charlie had mental health issues and had a history of testing behavior. And that's what a lot of times we see in a workplace, whether it's a professional workplace or a plant, is we see testing behaviors. So a lot of times what human resources can do is contact their account manager and talk about the situation. It can be determined that the employee is formally referred to the EAP, and then you have some monitoring of that situation. So denial or minimization is once that genie's out.
How much more, given the fact that we have so much gun violence in schools and other places, theaters and synagogues and all kinds of places now, how much more of this crisis issue in terms of things are you, not necessarily picking up business because of this, but how much more conversation are you finding of that because of what's going on here?
I can answer that one. So, active shooter policies. We don't, as a company now, we actually want them to sign off on them if they don't want the coverage. So it kind of protects us. It makes it known that they were aware of the issue. And again, an active shooter policy, you know, it ranges anywhere around $1,000 per million. It's actually going up with the more claims going on, but for a lot of companies, that should be a mandatory thing that they purchase along with EPLI and cyber and everything else. But we always go in there and get to the point where we want them on certain coverages to sign off on this. That's how important it is. There's a lot more, you're right, a lot more that's important.
Believe it or not, and to your point, right, in your example, she was inside, she knew Charlie, she felt that she could manage this, and she didn't need to go outside her circle to seek help and get that diversity in thought. And so that's why having that external team, I think, is important, because sometimes when you're in the middle of a crisis, you're not able to really see things as you should because of your relationships internally. And I would say, with respect to active shooter, I mean, it's so unfortunate that this is something that we have to train our workforces on, but this is just part of our regular arsenal as employment attorneys. It's something that we offer our clients as just regular annual training, is active shooter training. We have it in our schools. Not only do we train our principals and our administrators, my kids are in elementary and middle school, and they're trained quarterly on active shooter training. So as employers, we need to invest in our employees as we expect our schools and our governments to invest in their employees.
And sometimes employers are fearful of doing that, because like it's a bad omen or something, and they don't want to alarm their employees and make them feel it's not a safe workplace, and they don't get the preparedness part.
I had a client earlier this year invite me to go on a walkthrough with a security expert that they brought in to see where their holes might be. That's something I thought I would never do with the client. If they wanted me to understand the lengths that they were going to, if I need to act as their spokesperson to talk about the preparedness measures that they took, they wanted me to see it firsthand. And the word active shooter didn't exist in our vocabulary 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Now I think it's inevitable that I'll end up having to work with a client on some sort of situation like that. That's just where we are right now, and the workplace is where it's probably most likely to happen, because that's where emotions run high. We see that those emotions drive many of the crises that we all have to work with.
I mentioned at the start we may have time for a question or two. Looking out, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. Any questions? Okay, well, nobody has a question. I'm looking here, I don't see hands up anywhere. Okay, so we're winding down on time of this, and I guess what I'd like to do is ask each of you. I know coming into this, we all talked ahead of time, and I know you put thought into what you wanted to say about this. If there was one message you wanted to leave people in this room, a takeaway maybe, about this whole issue, what would that be? And Maria, let me start with you.
I think I've said it several times now, training. I think if you train your workforce, and again, from the front of the house all the way to the back of the house, and be prepared to do the right thing, that you will be able to manage through that crisis. I think one of my very first mentors said to me, the only thing left after a crisis is your conduct during it. And so as management folks, be sure to maintain your cool, and that plan will help you to be successful through that crisis.
I would say, don't be embarrassed. Don't worry about your company looking bad because something bad happened. Bad things are going to happen, and it's about how you handle it and how you deal with it and how you address the situation with concern for people and the reassurance that you can communicate during a crisis. That will determine the impact that it has on your business. So I would say in terms of preparation, be prepared to communicate. Don't be afraid of saying the wrong thing. Focus on how you'll be able to say the right thing in the time of a crisis.
Chuck?
Yeah, I don't want to be a dead horse here, but from our perspective, it's awareness. It's awareness on getting within that window of the 24 hours with certain carriers and reaching out to the carriers and having your team in place. Like you're the one that's making the call to the company, assigning duties if a crisis actually happens.
I'd say everybody knows when there's a crisis the 911 number, but when there's an emotional crisis, a tragedy in the workplace, do you know your phone number to call for that?
I would add one more to the whole thing, and that is, if you do find yourself in crisis, avoid saying no comment. Because it's guaranteed, you go in that bunker mentality, it will get out. Your employees talk with social media, it will get out. Stockholders, your board, your clients, it gets out, and I think Matt can probably talk for the next 3 years about it.
Yeah, that's part of that fear of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That they take some advice that they heard someplace about not saying
It won't
anything,
go away.
and it backfires every
Yeah,
time.
it does not go away. Believe me, there's people who will call me, and I know there's a disgruntled employee on the other line or what have you, and things do have a way of getting out here. So, but I want to thank our panel for sharing some really great insights into a lot of these issues involving crisis. I know you're going to be around here a little bit in case anyone does have questions, wants to talk to you sidebars offline here. We're going to take about a 15-minute break, and we're going to regroup for our second panel at 10:15. So set your watches, and we'll regroup at 10:15. So thank you very much, folks.